As water is becoming more and more scarce, stark warnings of disastrous consequences are repeatedly issued. Just what is the scale of the water shortage issue worldwide, and what can be done about it? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Lauren Taylor. Around 4,000 children die every day due to water shortages, and it's going to get worse. That's the warning from the World Water Forum being held in Turkey this week. Water scarcity has the potential to destabilise the world economically, environmentally and militarily. From Istanbul, Anita McNaught reports.
Jordan's water is running out because of drought, refugees coming in, neighbours like Israel annexing shared river resources and dam projects that haven't worked. Dams in Turkey haven't performed as well as hoped either, often ending up not cost-effective and causing their own social and environmental problems. All of this adds up to one thing, a major problem ahead.
The water crisis in the world, the global water crisis, is the most serious threat ecologically and humanly that we now have.
If water had a campaign office, it would hire Canadian MAUDE BARLOW as a spokesperson. She's senior advisor to the UN on water issues.
We are polluting, diverting, displacing, abusing water to the point where by 2025, half of the world's population will not have adequate access to water. It could not be more serious.
At the 5th World Water Forum, MAUDE BARLOW's speaking to packed houses. Representatives of more than 150 countries have come to Istanbul to share their concerns and look for answers.
I say to people all the time, we will address this issue by design or default. If it's default, it's because we've waited so long that all of a sudden we have a crisis, as in the Middle East, as in Australia, as in 22 countries in Africa, as in all of northern China, because they're using their water to produce all the toys for the world and so on, as in Mexico, as in the southwest of the US, as in Argentina. I mean, the crisis is here, as in southern Europe. It's not just the so-called poorer parts of the world.
Then there's the neighbours. The GAP project, designed to harness the Euphrates and Tigris rivers in Turkey's southeast, infuriated Syria and Iraq across the border. They saw it as a strategic threat. Water's becoming the new oil, the vital resource that countries could go to war over.
It's been a huge part of the Middle East tension. We're going to see more and more tension around aquifers, where one country, like for instance Libya, has put a pipe down and is taking water from an aquifer that belongs to 4 other countries. China is building a huge pipeline to take water from the Tibetan Himalayas, which feeds all of the great rivers of Asia. So I see a potential crisis between India and China. And I think you're going to see both of the superpowers, China and the United States, looking outside their borders for other supplies of water from outside.
Big cities are inherently greedy for water and blind to the problems their unslakable thirst is causing. MAUDE BARLOW and others like her are warning, forget the credit crunch, when the water crunch happens, we'll really feel it.
What people need to know immediately is that you can seem to have all the water in the world, but all of a sudden you don't have water, and the crisis is here on your doorstep. If we can try to get that into people's minds, and even if you do have enough water, there are going to be millions and millions of water refugees moving from places that have run out or are running out to places that still have water. So this is going to affect the whole planet, no matter whether you're a so-called water secure country or one of the countries in crisis.
In Istanbul this week, demonstrators call for anyone, to protect Turkey's water from exploitation. MAUDE BARLOW and others say the knowledge is out there.
We know how to do it. We don't yet have the political will.
The world's governments need to work together, she says, if we're to have a chance of leaving something worthwhile to future generations. Anita McNaught for Inside Story, Istanbul, Turkey.
Joining us today are our guests in Istanbul, BERGKAMP, Director General of the World Water Council. Also in Istanbul, MELANIE NAKAGAWA, who's Director of the Natural Resource Defence Council's Global Safe Water Project. And in Norwich, Mark ZEITOUN, Senior Lecturer at the University of East Anglia's School of International Development. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us on the discussion. If I could start with you, BERGKAMP, what would you say is the scale globally of the water shortage problem?
We see globally that you have a bit of a differentiated picture in some areas, like the Middle East, California, Australia, some parts of Africa, northern India, China. you see serious water scarcity that are of a continued nature. In other places you see more temporary scarcities that are likely to increase in the years to come.
Melanie Nakagawa, what would you say are the worst compounding factors for this problem?
Well, climate change and global warming is definitely a compounding factor. It's going to only exacerbate the existing crisis that leaves nearly 1 billion people without access to safe water and 2.5 billion without access to sanitation. The global climate change will also increase droughts frequency, and the more severity of these climatic changes will also lead to greater floods and other types of natural disasters.
Mark ZEITOUN, just for a kind of quick sense of what politically is at stake here. I mean, it's often talked about as a potential source of conflict. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in a sense, the whole water issue is about distribution, because there is enough water around the world to satisfy all the needs. It's just whether it's going to be distributed properly or not. And if you consider that 70% of the water used throughout the world is for irrigation, then it becomes about distribution of food. And as long as some states are taking the lion's share of the river and hampering trade barriers so that food imports become more difficult, then tensions are going to rise, as MAUDE BARLOW is saying. Lots of evidence of that.
Indeed. Let's have a quick look just for our viewers at the scale of this and how it's spread out. Much of North Africa, the Middle East and parts of Asia have what's called a severe physical water shortage. That means there's just not enough water to go around. But many of these countries survive because they're either rich enough to buy water or they can conserve what little they have. It's a very different story for Southern America, Africa and most of Asia Pacific. Here they suffer from economic water scarcity. They have little or no rainfall and they can't afford to buy in water. It also applies to regions like South America that have periods of heavy rainfall but lack the infrastructure to channel it to where it's needed. So what are the repercussions of water scarcity? Well, to begin with, in the hardest hit areas, there's not enough water to produce food, worsening the existing food crisis and hunger. It also impacts on industrialisation and power generation, which in turn stifles economic development. And in addition, many health issues are connected with lack of water, for instance, dehydration and waterborne diseases that are aggravated in areas of water scarcity. And while water has not been a major cause of violent conflicts in the past, the shortage could result in fierce competition for survival and tension, both at the national and international level. Just on that issue, Mark ZEITOUN, to come back to you, what are the main factors when it comes to control of water? Is it about that? Is it sort of getting control of water, or is it simply having money to control it?
I think money is a big part of it. Those of us in the water world realize that this saying that water flows uphill to money and power. In a state that has enough money to pump the water from one area to another, or to essentially the power to take it from the other states, is going to be better off than the weaker state. I'm thinking about the Jordan River, the Nile, and the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, for example.
BERGKAMP, there are lots of factors, obviously a complicated issue, but are there things like, waste in some areas that could be tackled that could make a difference to the amount of water scarcity?
Well, obviously, this is not an issue that is suddenly on the planet. Scarcity of water locally we have known for decades and years. It is not only climate change that brings about water scarcity. It is increasing population, changing patterns and lifestyles that putting an enormous pressure on these resources. To tackle them, we have technical solutions. You can, for example, become much more efficient with using the water, fixing the leaks, catching water from rooftops. So there are a lot of very practical ways that people can actually really deal at the very local level with water scarcity, and people are doing that. The challenge is at the larger scales, some of the larger consumers, how do you actually incentivize and actually push them towards taking on much more efficient water use approaches and measures?
Okay, Melanie Nakagawa, the link has been made between sort of poverty and water resources. How do you break that link, and how do you sort of make it more of an issue for areas where they do have water to try and tackle the problem for people who don't have the water?
Well, I think it's a twofold response to that. Is that first, we both need to raise awareness. while the water issue is definitely something that's local and in the backyards of many people around the world, it isn't in other areas as well. And I think we really do need to elevate and raise the political awareness as well as the public awareness about the water crisis. And we need more political action as well. And so for the second part to that, we also need more political action. We need more political levers being pulled to really incentivize the corporate entities as well as private industries to take action and to want to conserve and to be incentivized to conserve the water, whether it's through waterless toilets or rainwater harvesting or other technologies that Gare had previously discussed.
Gerbeck, I'm just going to come back to you. I mean, is there a requirement for some kind of international legislation, or is that pie in the sky?
Well, it is clearly needed if you look at sharing waters between countries. You need some sort of international peace that starts to regulate that. What we see currently here in the World Water Forum, where we are at the ministerial level discussing a new accord at a global level, it's really challenging to get all countries together to agree. So one of the approaches is very much to work things out at a regional level and link that to other kinds of cooperation. So not only water cooperation, but really sharing other benefits, economic cooperation, for example, like you see in Europe or Southern Africa, you do have other ways of cooperating that also then can bring in the water cooperation.
Mark ZEITOUN, just picking up on that point of the economic impact of water, is that right, though, that it could actually be sort of done as a broader economic agreements between countries rather than just about where the water comes from and who it goes to?
The idea is to share the benefits from the water, like share hydroelectricity or food that is produced from the water, rather than sharing the water itself. The problem is if you take a regional approach to everything, you're going to find, as you do now, that if the states can't share the water equitably, it's unlikely that the states will share the benefits equitably, and the basket of benefits will probably end up in the more powerful's camp. That's why many of us are proposing what you suggested, some sort of international norms for water sharing. And in fact, these exist in the sense that the 1997 UN Watercourses Convention clearly spells out the basis for allocation, which is equitable and reasonable use.
But how would you
details this.
Practically, though, how would you enforce that? I mean, would you need a sort of a body that actually goes onto the ground and enforces it?
Yeah, well, no, that's the problem. There is no global COP, or at least no police that everyone would agree to. So it's about building norms and reinforcing ideas that water should be shared equitably and reasonably, rather than flowing uphill to the powerful. Italy and France have just recently agreed to sign up to this UN Watercourses Convention. I believe the Palestinian Authority is also about to sign up to it. More and more states signing up to it would make it more difficult for the powerful states to justify the lion's share that they're receiving now.
Okay, do all three of you stay where you are? So we're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back we'll be looking at more of those potential solutions for addressing the global water scarcity issue. Do stay with us.